just had an episode out yesterday, but while we were taping that episode, unfortunately, we had another accident that happened around 6 p.m. last night in Philadelphia with a Lear 55, a medivac aircraft, taking out of the executive airport outside of Philadelphia. So, under the kind of similar to the conversations we've been having recently, if you've listened to the last couple of episodes with American Airlines and some examples. We talked about San Carlos Tower, these airports, probably smaller airports, general aviation airports that are near larger airports, like in this case, Philadelphia. So this airport, in particular, the Northeast Philadelphia Airport, with an identifier of PNE, Papa November Echo. Looks like a little bit to the northeast of the Philly airport, catering pretty much to this style of flying, whether corporate aircraft, but in this case, a medevac aircraft registered out of Mexico. And if you look at some of the videos online, I'll try to plop one into the description on this. It really just falls directly out of the sky into a parking lot, into a mall off the departure end of runway 24. This airport looks the same as what we've seen, a high density area, residential area, commercial area around it, communities that built up around the airport after looking at the timeline here and looking at some of the historicals, much after this plane was built, but coming down in a parking lot, like I said, just outside of a mall on departure. It sounds like the aircraft got to about 1,600 feet. There is air traffic control audio I listened to. Normal departure procedure for this medevac Lear 55 flight. About 40 so seconds into the flight, you can hear the air traffic controllers trying to make contact after they tell them to contact departure with no responses. So when you look at some of the videos, some ring cameras and stuff caught this aircraft going down outside the airport, just straight down into a large explosion into this mall parking lot. With 6 people on board, and unfortunately, it is a medevac flight, so transporting someone who either needed medical care or is an emergency situation. Considering some of the flight tracks here, I would assume probably more medical care. It looks like the family was from Mexico. The aircraft is registered in Mexico. The tail number is X-ray Alpha Uniform Charlie India. Each country gets an identifying letter. Like what we talked about with the American Airlines flight started with an N for a November number. So if the aircraft's registered in the United States, you'll see the tail number start with an N. In this case, X would represent Mexico. So it appears this aircraft was spent some time in Miami and then was in the Philadelphia area, going to Springfield, Missouri, and then continuing back to Tijuana, Mexico, and crashed, like I said, about 40 seconds off departure from the Northeast Philadelphia Airport, which is owned by the city of Philadelphia. So most airports in this country of the United States are either operated by a county, a city, or an authority, some sort of municipality government. In this case, a city. It's a system of airports, Philadelphia being the main. You see that some other places like Indianapolis, Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's kind of a main airport, and then they have an association of airports under the umbrella of usually like the city or whatever the governing structure of that airport commission or whatever it might be. So traveling from here to Springfield, Missouri, I actually know the folks that run the Springfield airport. So another unfortunate accident here. When you look at this incident, it really speaks to some accidents that potentially we've seen in the past. Obviously, as we say, and I will say it again, we always give benefit of the doubt. When you look at an accident, it takes a lot of time to kind of figure out exactly what happened here. But looking at past incidences, we can look at maybe some potential clues here of potentially what has gone wrong here. The weather wasn't great, but this aircraft should have been fine with the reported weather at the facility at the time. If you look at the trajectory and the straight down and the kind of the violence of this impact, it would lead you or someone to believe that obviously there was a loss of control in the aircraft. Would probably be the leading thought is a loss of control, And maybe that had something to do with a hydraulic failure. The aircraft was built in 1981. It is a Lear 55, but even a complete kind of hydraulic failure like that is very rare. But if you did lose to the hydraulics within the aircraft and you lost, your elevator, your ailerons, rudder control, it's possible you could end up in a trajectory like this where it's the aircraft's not maneuverable. Considering it was right on departure at 1,600 feet within 40 seconds, and no communication, air traffic control, whatever happened quickly. There are a couple accidents, at least where my mind has started to go, and I've worked some of these medical flights as well, and usually there's a lot of specialized equipment. Like I said, if you look at where this aircraft was flying from, I would assume that it's probably not an emergency situation, but more scheduled procedures that somebody was maybe having with specialists. At least from what we're seeing, some reporting in the Florida area is that the aircraft left Opelika in Miami-Dade County, which was Miami to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Springfield, and then Springfield, Missouri to Tijuana, Mexico, as we spoke about before. This aircraft registered to the company Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. They had said in a statement that they cannot confirm any survivors, and their immediate concern is for the patients and the family of personnel and their families and any victims that may have been hurt on the ground. And I should mention that I watched some of the local news in the Philadelphia area, and they talked to one of the council members from there, and they had not confirmed if anyone had perished on the ground. Unfortunately, with an accident, especially something like this that so violently hits the ground like that, well, I'm assuming just from accident investigations, it will take some time to try to figure out what exactly was going on the ground and did it impact. What I was going to kind of get at here, my speculation, again, to be an investigation on this, and we'll follow back up, but is it possibly a weight and balance issue with the aircraft? And when you look at some of the video on this, there's a couple of things in the past that were reminiscent to me of this type of accident. The first one was Air Midwest Flight 5481, which was a Beechcraft 1900. I actually worked, side story here, I worked Beechcraft 1900s. I worked for Midwest Airlines for a little bit. And I remember, so one of the perks that you would get when you were for Midwest, like you see nowadays, is you could be a non-revenue passenger. And so I would fly on a lot, but I remember we would have to do safety announcements on Midwest Airlines. But the Beech 1900s are so loud that you would get in, and it would really just sound like the Peanuts character, like the parents. You'd be in the back in your seat. Engines would fire up right back. Okay, I guess that meets FAA guidelines that a emergency speech was given to the passengers on the airplane. So we've checked that box. But the Beech 1900 has a ton of thrust. I remember just going down the runway, and you just felt like it was going to push you back in your seat. I would say, I remember one time I was holding a bag of peanut M&Ms, and I'm like, I just feel like these things are just going to blow out of my hands in the back of the plane. But I digress on a Beech 1900 story, because I do love Beech 1900s. If you're any good airplane enthusiasts, you have an office filled with airplane models, which I do. And all of my models usually have some tie to something that I've done before. When we had inaugural service on Aeromar, we had one of their ATR 72s that was given to me as a present, which I keep in my office now. What I've always looked for, and kind of what is my white whale, if you will, that I can't find, is a Beech 1900 in Midwest livery. There was one point in my life where I found one that somebody actually whittled out of wood. Looked pretty cool. They wanted like $600. I didn't have the money at the time to buy something like that. But if anybody's out there that has a Beech 1900 model in Midwest livery, drop me a line at dapodcast85gmail.com, and I will buy that from you. But back to our Beechcraft 1900D with Air Midwest, which, as we said before, was flight 5481, was a flight out of Charlotte Douglas International Airport in Charlotte, North Carolina, to Greenville Spartanburg International Airport in Greer, South Carolina. This happened January 8th of 2003. There was 21 passengers and crew on board, which all perished when the aircraft departed Charlotte Douglas International Airport and had the same exact trajectory straight down into a hangar facility, which did injure one person at the airport. So immediately after becoming airborne, Flight 5481's nose began to rapidly pitch up. By the time it reached the altitude of 90 feet above ground level, the plane's nose had pitched 20 degrees despite both pilots trying to forcibly push the nose down. The plane continued to pitch nose up, reaching a maximum of 54 degrees of pitch. The aircraft's stall warning horn sounded, and the pilots declared an emergency to air traffic controllers. After climbing to an altitude of 1,150 feet, the plane stalled, abruptly pitching down in an uncontrollable descent. About 35 seconds after takeoff, Flight 5481 crashed into the aircraft maintenance hangar and burst into flames. So the cause of this crash was determined to be a combination of two separate issues. After takeoff, the plane climbed steeply as a result of higher than calculated weight on the aircraft, which generated an incorrect CG readout, or center of gravity. Basically, the tail of the aircraft was so heavy, even with direct inputs into the elevator for a pitched nose down from both the pilot and the first officer, the plane wouldn't respond because the center of gravity was off that much. They miscalculated how much weight was actually being put onto the aircraft. I think it is fair to point out here that the actual NTSB report in this crash said that it was the FAA guidance that was incorrect on the average weight of a passenger at the time, which was inputted into the pilot's records. So their math wasn't off. They had incorrect data that made their math off. They were actually 580 pounds overweight for the Beechcraft 1900. And in this particular case, they did say something that probably contributed to it was there was the elevator control cable that was replaced and incorrectly tested and put back in, which caused less than optimal elevator control in this Beech 1900. In this particular aircraft's case, they said neither problem alone would have caused a loss of control, but combined, they caused this accident, which, again, even an off weight and balance, though, could create this scenario, and we're talking about that in our next example. If you've seen the video from 2013, there's a Boeing 747 that was being operated by National Airlines for cargo. This would have been out of Afghanistan, so they were transporting U.S. military equipment at the time. One of the pieces of equipment that was on the aircraft actually broke loose on departure, rolling to the back of the plane, which caused a nosed-up attitude. And you can hear the pilots as this aircraft's in the air trying to struggle to maintain the aircraft with elevator control. And you can see kind of similar to the videos that we're seeing from these Philadelphia crash, where the aircraft comes straight down. In this, you have a better view. It's better, it's during the day, it's not at night. Meteorological conditions are better, so you can actually see the attitude of the plane going up and then coming straight down. And then this kind of violent smash into the earth, an explosion. And, these are on departure, right? So these three incidences that we're talking about now, both this National Air Cargo 747 that had a weight and balance issue that caused it to go straight down, the Air Midwest flight 5481, same, and then this Air Medivac flight where they're all having kind of this violent strike into the earth. So in the 747 case, the NTSB had noted that National Air Cargo Group failed to properly tie down this equipment into the aircraft and restrain it from rolling back and causing a weight imbalance, center of gravity issue again, which sent this aircraft into a nose-up position and then eventually stalling into a nose-down position. So those two incidences kind of reigned into my mind as a potential possibility for something that has happened here. When you look at the news articles, when you look at what they're doing, a lot of times these flights are almost like angel flights, right? It can vary. Sometimes there are people that are higher net worth that need to go somewhere. That does happen, but it's also sometimes a very charitable thing, and for people to spend their time to do this. But I did have somebody reach out to me. I think it's only fair to mention it. Adding again, absolute speculation on all of this, and that's what this is. And this podcast is we're just reviewing the information that we have. But somebody asked me, could it have been a deliberate action? Which, of course, yes, that is always a possibility. I highly doubt in this case. It doesn't look like a type of case that this would happen. I mean, you think of things like Malaysia Airlines where there's a deliberate action, and more particularly where there's something violent like this, straight down crash, would be more reminiscent to me of Silk Air Flight 185, which in December 1997 killed 97 passengers and 7 crew members on board when the pilot deliberately sent the aircraft into a nosedive. Again, I'm not speculating that that's what happened here at all. I don't think so. I think if you listen to the air traffic control tapes, at least what we know out front, it sounds like something happened drastically which caused this aircraft to either not be able to function, or something happened in the aircraft that was immediate and beyond the pilot's control, like a weight and balance issue. If you look in the past at the case of like South African Airways Flight 295 in 1987, it's still a mystery to this day exactly what happened when you look at the manifest and the cargo hold. It took off, was in flight, was coming in for an arrival. The flight was fine, long flight. There's something caught fire, and they started to lose critical systems like, their communications, eventually hydraulic systems. The tail actually ripped off the plane. They never got to the bottom of that, but there was a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of going back and forth. The fire ate through critical systems, but it took time to do that. In this instance, where you see that it's so sudden and impactful, that's why it reminds me of kind of those two scenarios we pointed out earlier, like in the 747 case, where it's something like a weight and balance that's so drastic, it causes an issue like that. Like I said, working these flights, a lot of times there is heavy equipment that goes along with it, especially if somebody has a medical condition that requires certain things. It's all speculation, but, we can tell, right, when you look at an NTSB accident report, right, the first thing they kind of look at is the four corners of the aircraft, the nose, the two wings, and the tail, to see if they're all intact. If they're all intact, then nothing struck the aircraft. But I mean intact, I mean at the accident site. If there's a wing missing or something, then you could say, okay, it impacted, right? Like the situation outside Reagan with the American Airlines, when you look at it, I mean, that was apparent that something happened because you had videos right at the end of the airport. But in that case, you could tell it looked like the left wing of that CRJ-700 was ripped off. So if that would have happened en route and they were, searching for it, that's something that, they would have gone, and that the wing of that aircraft would have not been with the other three pieces of that CRJ-700. So in this case, on departure, it didn't sound like there was anything else. There's no other aircraft missing, so unless it was a drone or something like that. But again, you would assume that it would have to be something very impactful. A smaller drone is probably not going to rip the wing or something off of a Lear 45, which leads me back to think that it's probably something to do with, again, a major issue within the control systems of the aircraft, or something along a weight and balance issue. Again, time will tell, and we'll learn from this incident like we learned from everything. It's just unfortunate. Like I said, it's when you look at general aviation, these accidents, you can find something pretty much every day. Something larger like this, not every day, just a smaller aircraft. But general aviation in general, and there's so many flights happening, and especially something like this where it's a medivac. These type of flights are usually into airports that maybe these pilots don't operate out of all the time because they're going there for some sort of specialist or facility that someone needs to get to. But horrible incident. Wanted to get something out, at least some initial thoughts. A lot of people were sending me emails and text messages, and they said, hey, did you see this? And it literally just happened after we got the episode done last night. So I just wanted to kind of send out a quick, hey, we saw this. We're thinking of everybody. Hope everybody, that the rescuers on the ground there, that people are safe on the ground. So unfortunate to lose these 6 souls. They're in our thoughts as well. And again, as we look at our community, there's a lot of grieving happening right now. But for us to kind of learn from these accidents and incidents, hopefully make us safer flyers for tomorrow. So, like I said, I wanted to send this out quick right now. Feel free to drop me a line at dapodcast85@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or you want to kind of throw out there what your thoughts are about this accident, I'd be happy to share those over the podcast. But until next time, my friends, I will see you down the runway.